welcome you and I want to thank you for taking the time to attend this workshop. I believe it will be of great benefit to you. It's been of great benefit to many who have given me a couple of hours or an hour and a half of their time. I became involved in disaster and all of this back in 1992 was a volunteer that went down Hurricane Andrew. How many of y'all were involved or saw Hurricane Andrew? Yeah, one or two. It was pretty awful, wasn't it? I mean, if you didn't see it, if you didn't feel it, if you didn't smell it, you have no idea what those people were dealing with. Shortly thereafter, the no-name storm hit the west coast of Florida, and I live on the west coast of Florida. I live in Brooksville, Florida. About 1,800 families in my county were flooded with the surge that came in. I ended up, for some reason, I was a real estate broker. I was doing pretty well as a real estate broker, actually. And I made a phone call to our emergency manager and said, gee whiz, is there anything I can do to help? And she said, well, we need somebody to help with volunteers and donations. I said, oh, I'm sure I can figure that one out. Did a little bit of that, ended up being the director of the Interfaith Coalition of Hernando County through the rebuild after the no-name storm in Hernando, Citrus, and Pasco County, and then went on to become the director of Florida Interfaith Network and Disaster. I've been involved, been on the scene for every catastrophic disaster in the state of Florida since 1993. Unfortunately, I have dealt with thousands, literally thousands, of individuals, families who have lost their homes to hurricane and flood events. Didn't take very long to make me a believer that we had to start doing something. We had to figure out a way for homes to survive the storm because of the pain and suffering that I dealt with, the people that I dealt with. Who can tell me how long it typically takes to rebuild a home that's been majorly damaged in the aftermath of a disaster? A hurricane. Who can tell me? Give me some ideas.
6 months to a year.
Anybody else?
A year to 5 years.
The average is 18 months. That 18 months at least, you and your family's lives are going to be turned upside down. And I mean literally, totally turned upside down. Who can define the word mitigation for me? I believe if people really understood it better, this room would be standing room only. If they had any idea what I'm fixing to tell you, it would be standing room only. Who can define mitigation for me?
Reduction, to lessen the impact.
You're very close, yes. The way I like to define it is anything we can do today, any action we can take to either lessen or eliminate the impact of something in the future. And this workshop is about things we can do today to your homes, you the homeowners, for your homes to survive the storm. Now we're going to talk about other things, but I can tell you the reason that I am standing here today and investing my time to send this message is because I want to eliminate the pain and suffering of people who lose their homes. So my main objective of this workshop is to teach you how to fortify, how to harden, how to strengthen your home so it will survive a hurricane. And fortunately, today we can do that. This program was funded by the Division of Emergency Management, a grant from the Division of Emergency Management that actually came to Florida's Foundation, and they contracted with me to put on these workshops. I want to thank St. Lucie County and all the wonderful, what a wonderful refreshments and all of that. Carmen and Marie, thank you so much. Grateful to be here today. This is what we typically deal with in Florida in the summertime, isn't it? But ever so often we end up with this. How many of y'all were here in 2004, 2005, 2006? Okay, I don't really think I have to do a whole lot for most of you to convince you that hurricanes happen. And they happen to us, and they happen to you in this county, in this community. They certainly happen all over Florida. back in the aftermath of Hugo, probably when it really started, not only were there people like me after that, but people like me that were saying we got to figure out a way. We got to figure out some way for the homes to survive. The insurance industry was also saying we got to figure out something. We can no longer afford to continue to pay these claims, these outrageous claims of catastrophic events. So probably the insurance industry was the forerunner of it, and they started doing a lot of real solid scientific research. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is based on research. When I talk to you about it to do this or to do that, it's backed by research. Now I've already talked about or sort of alluded to one of the benefits of doing mitigation, that your house would survive, that your family, you and your family would not have to go through the disruption and the pain and the suffering and the misery of losing your home. Has anybody lost their home? It's pretty awful, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Not something you want to go through again, is it?
Not really. No.
Yeah, yeah. Second benefit, and I give the Florida home builders all the credit in the world for this, is the Florida home builders, when the insurance industry forced that there be some changes made to how houses were being built to make them stronger, to hopefully come closer to surviving the storm with less damage. The home builders said, well, that's going to cost us more money to produce those houses, and you tell us they're going to be safer, they're going to be stronger, so you're not going to have to pay as much out in insurance premiums or claims. So we want you to we want these people who have done this to their house or new housing, new construction, to get discounts on their house. And there was a battle back and forth, frankly, between the home builders and the insurance industry and the legislature, and finally they did come up with, and yes, in fact, there are certain activities you can do to your house that will provide you with discounts on your wind portion of your insurance. Who is receiving discounts? Okay, very good. Now, I will tell you about those discounts. We learned a lot about that back in 2006, 2007, when they started the My Safe Florida Home program in the state of Florida. What a great program. They came in, they inspected the houses, they gave you a laundry list of the things you could do to your house to fortify your house, to make it stronger. They actually even provided some grants to help make that happen. Unfortunately, that program went away, but what that also allowed many of us to do was to take that list and take it to the insurance company and say, okay, this has been done to my house, so I get a discount for this. Well, that worked out pretty well until about a year ago, when Citizens was looking for some way to increase their revenues, because, of course, by legislation, they can't raise your rates, but just a percentage every year. They can't make them actuarially sound. So one of the ways they figured out that maybe they could get more revenues was to go back and re-inspect all these houses. And in many cases, how many of you have had a re-inspection from your insurance company and they've dropped a lot of what they covered or they gave you discounts for? It's happened all over. First started with Citizens, and now we see a number of other insurance companies coming in and doing that as well. How many of y'all are insured by Citizens? Well, you're lucky. Stay tuned. I want to do a couple of definitions here. Who can tell me what continuous load means? What is continuous load?
The weight on your beams?
The way I like to describe continuous load is I got the roof, I got the walls, I got the foundation. What we're after here and what they figured out is important is we want that all connected. So that actually we can pick it up, turn it upside down, flip it around, and it all still stays together. Okay, that's what continuous load, that's where we're going here. Who can tell me what a soffit is?
The portion of the roof that sticks out over the wall.
It's the underside, the eave. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit. Gables, what are gables?
Pointed pieces.
Yes, yes. Prior to Hurricane Andrew, and then what they began to really learn about it, A lot of our architecture included gable roofs in Florida. Today, not so much. Most of your new construction, maybe you not noticed, but most of your new construction does not include a gable roof. Most of it has hip roofs. Hip roofs survive better. And glazed surfaces, we're just going to be pretty much talking about windows there. Again, I want to give a lot of credit to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They have led the way in the research and certainly in a lot of this. They actually worked with the Florida Insurance Council to create FLASH, which was originally the Florida Alliance for Safe Homes, now the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. FLASH was the organization that created Blueprint for Safety, which was some of the first education that architects and engineers and home builders had available for them to really begin to understand what they were learning from the research. And then, of course, the Florida home builders. I give them a lot of credit. Wind pressure. It's what keeps airplanes in the air, okay? But it's also what this is all about. So we said to the engineer, we said, okay, you know, yeah, I see airplanes up there in the air, but I don't really think about or pay much attention to why they stay up there. And I said, how do I explain to you and to you in these workshops, how do I explain to you what we're talking about here? And he said, well, this is the way I like to do it. I tell him I'm sitting at my kitchen table. It's a beautiful spring morning. I got the back door open, right? There's a little light breeze blowing. There's a knock at my front door. So I jump up and I go run into the front door because I think it might be the girl selling Girl Scout cookies and I sure don't want to miss her. So I go to the front door, open the front door, and what happens? Back door slams. The back door slams. Now you and I both know that little light breeze wasn't strong enough and certainly fast enough to have blown through the house to slam that back door. Well, here's what happens, and this is what they figured out. When the wind enters, okay, right here, there is actually a suction that occurs on the opposite side. So the wind didn't blow that door shut. A suction action pull that door shut from the outside. And the suction is exponentially stronger than the speed or the force of the wind. So we can have a little bit of wind here and a huge reaction on the opposite side. Well, you can imagine if it's strong enough to slam that back door with a little tiny bit of nothing breeze. You can imagine what a 100-mile-an-hour wind must do in the form of an effect on the outward side, the leeward side of your house. Where is it? Come on. Whoops, wrong one.
So you should leave your windows open.
No, no, we don't do that anymore. No. Okay. There are a few things we don't do anymore, and that's one of them.
I didn't know
Okay.
anybody did it.
Yeah, oh yeah, they used to. They used to. This is just another sample of what we're trying to, and this is what they figured out. I mean, this was a huge portion of what they figured out. IBHS got busy and have actually created a list of things you do to your house, and if you do them to your house or your house has had this done to it, you can become a fortified home. And they have a gold and a silver and a bronze standard of a fortified home. And if you go to the IBHS website, and there's information in your book on it too, you can look up and see what that is. You know, I told you in 1993 I was involved in the No Name Storm and in a little bit as a volunteer in Andrew, and this wonderful restoration contractor from South Carolina who had been involved, he had been affected by Hugo and done a lot of the rebuild after Hurricane Hugo. I remember what he said. He said, you know, the code is only the minimum. You have to stop thinking in terms of the building code being what you have to do. The building code should be the minimum you do. And fortified home is definitely beyond the code. Now, this little video I'm going to show you is frankly going to say a whole lot more than I could ever say in words to help you understand what they figured out. What they did is they built this warehouse, or they had this warehouse, and they put a bunch of big fans in it, okay, to simulate hurricane wind. And then, where'd you go? And then they built two houses. They built one house, you see the house on the right, yellow one, to the fortified standard. They built the house on the left pretty much like the construction was typical around the time of Hurricane Andrew. Now, it's my understanding they rebuilt the house on the left 5 times. They never had to rebuild the house on the right. So, in just a minute here, I want you to pay attention in this next one. I want you to watch what happens with the front door. Watch the front door on the house on the left. Not very long after the front door goes in, the wind gets in the house. The house is history. Now watch this one, and watch what happens with the back door when the front door... Right out of the frame. Again, if you missed it, it's not just the door coming out, the whole frame comes out. Sort of tells the story, doesn't it? Once the wind gets in the house, pretty much, if it's a hurricane, the house is history. I love this one. How'd you like to be the cameraman that got to do that one? Okay. So there's the proof. They have figured this out. If you do certain things with your house, you have a really good chance of your house not only surviving the storm, but surviving it with little or no damage. Fortunately, they've built a lot of fortified homes around the country, but fortunately they haven't been heavily hit yet. This is a picture, though, that was taken, this was Hurricane Ike, so this was in Texas. And you can see there's like 6 houses there that are virtually, you can see the houses in the front are gone. And you can see there are all kinds of houses, obviously, that are gone. But there are those 6 houses that survived. Now, there is, you probably can't see it real well, there is one house that has a little bit of a blue tarp on it. And this is about the time I suggest that you take an extra booklet home with you, and you walk across the street and you meet your neighbor, invite them over for a little refreshment, and share with them what you've learned today. Because the reason that blue tarp is on that house is because a part of the house in front of it came over and slammed into the roof. So we've got to all do this for us all to be safe. No matter what you do, if you're in an evacuation zone, no matter how strong you make your house, it does not mean you don't have to evacuate. If they order the evacuation, you must evacuate. The good news is that you should have a home to come home to, and you won't have to live in a travel trailer with your family for 18 months to 2 years or longer to get your home rebuilt. Your home's your largest asset. Who in this room can afford to lose your home? Like, just lose it? No, nothing? Well, I will tell you that's the precarious position we are going to find ourselves. Come on in. Come on. We may find ourselves. Last spring, I was in I did a workshop down in Naples, and the senator who headed up the insurance committee for the state of Florida was there. And I thought, well, this will be interesting, what he has to say about all this. He probably fuss at me because I'm sort of doom and gloom about insurance. And he said, no, he said, you're right on. He said, Citizens, which is the state insurance, Citizens Insurance has $7 billion in the bank. and $700 billion in written risk. Any kind of storm that say, it, God forbid, something like Andrew happens, and it can happen again, that comes across, hits the East Coast here, comes across, hits the West Coast, or vice versa, which happens all the time, we're out of business. There's not enough money in the pot to pay the claims.
I think that's for all the insurance companies in Florida. I think they got a minimum that they have to have, and that's all they got.
That's right.
And if you're not the first one to call.
That's right. That's right. So sitting here today, do not assume, even though you write those big insurance checks, do not assume that there are resources behind that company to pay your claim, including the state of Florida. We talked about reduced insurance premiums. We're going to talk more about that. Reduced damage, reduced debris. Can you imagine the debris that 2,000 or 3,000 houses create? Sure, FEMA comes in and they pay 75, in some cases they paid 100% of the cost to get rid of that debris. But who's FEMA? Who pays FEMA's bills? We do. We, the taxpayers, pay that bill. So can you imagine how much less expensive the cost of disaster would be if we didn't have all that debris to clean up of the houses? And we've talked about reduced recovery time. Insurance premium savings, but also increased value of your home. As I say, I'm a real estate broker. I've been a real estate broker for 30 years. I know how this works. I got your house listed. It's a fortified house. You've done things to it to harden it up. We're pretty sure your house is going to survive, and you're paying $1,200 less a year than she is. They're right down the street from each other. They're almost the same house. Which house do you think I'm going to sell? Whose house is going to sell faster? And whose house is going to sell for more money? Because I can promise you, at least the people who are coming down here from Sandy are going to be asking a lot of questions about how strong that house is and when it was built and how it was built. And unfortunately, this room should be full of realtors and real estate appraisers. When they begin to totally understand this, there is no doubt in my mind that what I'm going to suggest you do to your house today, you will get back in the value when you go to sell your house in the future. And your house will survive, and you will pay far less in insurance. This was a map. It's not my favorite map. The map I love that talks about hurricanes and incidents and stuff like that is the one where you can hardly see the map for all the lines of hurricanes coming and going. But I don't have to convince you all in St. Lucie County that your county can be hit by a hurricane or affected by a hurricane. Now, I have to tell you, it's a little harder sell over on the West Coast. Sarasota and Tampa Bay and places, I mean, they're pretty sure. In fact, I had a gentleman tell me at one of the workshops, he said, well, you know, we got these Indian mounds out there. And they keep this, the Indian spirits keep the storms away. I said, oh, okay. Well, that's about as sound a scientific reason why they haven't been hit as any. Because there is no scientific reason why any of our coasts aren't hit. Florida's had 8 out of 10 of the most expensive hurricanes have made landfall in Florida. We know hurricanes are increasing in frequency. I'm not going to stand up here and say why, but we know it's happening. And in strength. Hurricane Andrew, back in Hurricane Andrew, was $22 billion. If Andrew were to come today the same path, it would be $52 billion. How much did I say Citizens had in the bank? 7. And actually, new information I've read, they're now this year, after, I guess, Tropical Storm Debbie or a few things, they're actually down to 6. They lost $1 billion last year. Charlie, 10, today 16. Wilma, 10, today $20 billion. These storms are not cheap. This is the new windborne debris map that they came out with. And the windborne debris map is basically, if you're in the wind, you can see this is building departments and are required now that if you're within these different areas, you have to build to withstand this standard. Now let me see. How old is your house? When was your house built? 2002. And you, sir? 85?
1970.
1970.
83.
83?
85.
76. 91.
Okay. Carl?
2000.
2000?
69. 73.
Okay. And you? Your house?
2004.
Okay.
80.
Okay.
99, 90,
99.
2002.
93.
Why did I ask that question? Oh, you, back there. 86. And you?
03.
03. Why did I ask that question?
Different codes.
Code.
Different codes. Took them 10 years after Andrew, but 10 years after Andrew, they finally passed the Florida Unified Building Code in 2002. So houses that were built after 2000, and I'd almost say almost 2003, my husband happens to be a certified general contractor, and I remember back in 2002, everybody was racing to get their permits in before the new code came into effect. So, you know, even though your house was built in 2002, it may or may not have been built to the new code, but probably by 2003 it would have. They did a lot of things based on research. They changed a lot of things. There's a different nailing pattern on your roof. How many of y'all have had your, either you have a new roof or you had your roof redone since 2002? Okay. For those who you haven't, I strongly recommend you consider redoing your roof. First of all, I will share with you, having to do with the roof, that a roofing inspection is in your future if your roof is 15 years old. The insurance company is going to come in and say, we will not insure you unless you have your roof inspected and you have 3 years usable life. Have I got any insurance agents in the room? 3 years usable life in your roof. Now, we had an insurance agent in the workshop this morning, and she said 3 years usable.
What does that mean, 3 years usable life?
It means the inspector believes that the roof is going to survive for 3 years longer without any problems.
Just going to die of old age?
Oh, roofs in Florida do die of old age. Yes, they do. Yeah, you know, just because you put 20 or 30-year shingles on your roof, don't plan on them lasting that long. And the insurance companies don't believe it either. Okay?
How about tiles?
Tiles are a little different, but again, if those tiles are pre-2002, they're different and they were installed differently.
I know that.
From what, so, you know, that's an iffy thing. Now, it's my understanding, she said today, that the insurance companies look at it about 20 years with tile. But, you know, they're on to this about roofs. Because as you saw, we got to keep the wind out of the house, and one of the things we got to make sure survives is that roof. And today, since 2002, and then again last year, we had another building code change that again even further strengthened how they tied the roof, the sheeting down to the trusses, how the trusses and that whole process that we're going to talk about here. This is basically the same map, except it shows how much they increased the windborne debris area in the state of Florida. The turquoise that you see there is increased. The red stayed the same. It didn't go away. It increased. But the turquoise increased. So, you know, it took in a whole lot more of the state of Florida. And insurance companies tell me that they don't like I call them for-profit insurance companies. In other words, not government insurance, not citizens. They don't like selling wind insurance in windborne debris areas. Now, I don't know how many of you know where your county is, but it happens to be sitting in the red and the turquoise. You are totally windborne debris in the windborne debris area. Now, what does that mean? Aside from the fact that the for-profit insurance companies And I can tell you, after Sandy and the bath they took in Sandy, they are all looking at, we do not want to cover wind at all, anywhere. So stay tuned. But I can promise you in the wind-borne debris area, they really don't want to cover you. And so your insurance is affected. The other thing that the wind-borne debris area is telling us, and today, if you build a house in the wind-borne debris area, you are absolutely required to have opening protection. In other words, some form that's going to protect those windows and those doors from the wind. And a few other things, but that's a huge one if you're in the wind-borne debris area. This slide I really have to change because I've had insurance agent. How many of you told me you get discounts from your insurance company? How much do you get?
Couple bucks.
Couple bucks?
That's right, for new shutters.
Well, you ought to get a lot more than a couple bucks.
That's not much.
Pardon?
35%, I think it is.
35%? Good.
About 50%
50%.
from Allstate.
If you do everything, you can get about 80% savings on your wind. Yeah, I live 25 miles inland, which, you know, the amounts for certain pieces of it are less the further inland you go. And I save about $1,270 a year on my wind portion of my insurance policy for doing it. So when they talk about here, average hurricane premium 610, who in this room has one that low?
How much?
You pay less than $610 a year? No. You know, yeah, a month. That's right. That's right. But also at the same time, the $300 annual savings is way low too. If you do even a reasonable amount of this, and I have no window protection. I have no opening protection in my house. I get $1,250 savings on my insurance.
If you have no protection, why do you get it?
I have no opening protection. I have other things that I've done to my house. Okay, we're going to start talking in a minute about things you actually can do to your house. Most of it are permittable activities. In other words, they are things that you should pull a building permit to do. You as a homeowner can pull the building permit, but I just really want to instill in you, do not try and do this without a building permit, because especially if you want to receive any kind of discount from your insurance company for doing it. They are not going to give you a discount if you cannot show them that you pulled a building permit to do the things that require a building permit. Secondly, and I want to say this directly to the building department here, we've had situations, and last year when I put this workshop on over in Charlotte County, which is where Charlie made landfall, I had the, first I had the building official, no, I guess I had him too, but I had the emergency manager, Wayne Soliday, in the audience. And he was explaining, he said, you know, in the aftermath of a major disaster, we allow people to come in and do things to their houses like get their roofs repaired without pulling permits. Well, I also happened to have in the audience a couple who had done that. Their house had been damaged, the roof had been damaged, they'd had somebody repair their roof and had not pulled a building permit. The insurance company would no longer insure their house because they could not prove how that roof had been put back on that house. They were having to completely remove the shingles to then prove how, and of course they weren't even sure how it had been done. So be very careful there when we talk about these things. Do not do it without a building permit, and even if it's in the aftermath of a disaster, be very careful what you do without asking the building department to come and inspect it and give you the certification, the verification that it was done correctly. Types of mitigation. We've talked a lot about what is it we wanted to keep out of the house? Wind. Charlie taught us there was another little fella that we needed to keep out of the house, and that was water. How does water get in the house?
With the wind.
It can get in the house with the wind. It can come in through cracks in the windows or around the windows and the doors. Charlie came through Orlando area and drove water right through the walls. Unfortunately, they had new construction there, and they had a stucco that failed. And they had huge problems. They also had paint that failed. And if you're in many people who are in high-rise condos or have high-rise condos, the water is driven right through the walls. So you need to be careful about that, especially if you happen to be one who has a condo and you're a winter, you're only down here in the wintertime. You need to for sure make sure somebody goes in and checks your condo or your home to make sure no water got in it, because if it sits there with no air conditioning and nobody does anything about it, well, we're going to talk about what happens. There now is, and this is new, secondary water barriers. Most of you, I can about guarantee you, that in this room, almost none of you have a secondary water barrier on your roof. You do. Good for you. Good for you. There are 2 or 3 different kinds. One of them is, you can see it looks like duct tape up there. It's not duct tape. It's a tape made to seal joints. Now, before they seal the joint, if they redo your roof, a new roof, okay, they're going to nail it to the new nailing pattern that the new code tells them to nail to. They're going to use a different kind of nail than typically probably it was used. They're going to use a ring shank nail. It's a nail that's it's rough, it bites better, tighter. They're going to put more nails in it. When they're doing that, and I'm not telling you to go home and re-roof your roof if you don't need it, okay? But if your roof's 15 years old, I promise you, a new roof's in your future. But when they do that, I want you to send a camera up there. And I want you to have them take a picture of how your roof's been re-nailed. Okay? And make sure that the picture, not only you can show that, maybe the guy who's doing it can stand next to it, and make it so the picture shows that it's pretty obvious that it's your roof. When they put the secondary water barrier on, I want you to take another picture. And I want you, what I really want you to do is when you go home tonight, I want you to get yourself a nice heavy-duty manila folder. I don't care. It can be white, it can be cream color, it can be orange. I don't care. But a heavy-duty one. And I want you to write on it, house mitigation. Because what you're going to need to start doing is putting any kind of documentation you can into that folder. So when you go to sell your house, or the inspector comes, you can prove to them that you did this and how you did it, because once you put a roof covering on this roof, they're not going to be able to tell how it was done. Another product is called underlayment, and it's sort of like a contact paper. It sort of peels off and it sticks to the whole roof, okay? And then you can put your shingles, your tiles, your metal on it. Any one of those 3 is fine, as long as it's new. In other words, the product is to today's standards and it's installed correctly. Yes?
I had my roof done and I had the secondary roof barrier put on. And then I had it inspected after the roof was finished by wind mitigation guy. And I had to have pictures of the roofing, just like you said. That's the only way they would accept it.
That's right. How else would they know? You know, I guess you could take part of the roof off and show them. You've got to start thinking in terms of the fact that you've got to prove this. Because not only is it nice, hopefully we get discounts, I think we'll go to the days that if you can't prove this, they won't give you insurance at all. You know, we are losing the upper hand with these insurance companies. They are only going to insure the cream, and anybody else, you're just out of luck.
Is that underlayment not tar paper?
No. It's not tar paper. It's a different product, and as I say, what they call underlayment.
Membrane.
And they don't
It's
need to use the tar paper?
Oh no, they put the tar
see-
paper
oh,
on
okay.
top of it.
All right. Okay.
No, they still do the tar
It's a
paper.
water barrier.
It's a water barrier.
It closes up that joint where the decking comes together, so water can't.
Yeah, yeah. If you're not re-roofing your house and you don't believe that you've had the water barrier done to your roof, that you got years usable life in your roof, You can also use, there's a polyurethane foam that you can spray up there. And it, you know, you can see. It does two things. One is it provides that secondary water barrier. Okay, so if your shingles fail, the water's still not going to come through those seams where the plywood comes together or the sheeting comes together. The second thing this does is it provides a strength. Unfortunately, you know, we talked about that things weren't exactly, construction wasn't so great back in the days of Hurricane Andrew. We saw that with the video, right? Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they would adhere the sheeting to the trusses, put it down, and they'd use nail guns, right? Or staple guns, and they just go whap, 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 whap. Now the thing about it is, it doesn't make any sense to me because the gun sounds different. It sounds different when you hit something or when you don't. But evidently in Hurricane Andrew's path, a lot of the installers didn't much care whether they hit something or not, because they found in many, many, many cases that the sheeting was actually not tied down to the truss. This will take care of that. So if you go up in your attic, I can about guarantee if you go up in your attic, you're going to see nails sticking through. It just is. But what you want to check around a little bit about is if you got this uncomfortable feeling that that sheeting is not significantly tied down and attached to your trusses, then you might want to have somebody come and do this. Do not do this yourself. Hire someone to do it. And take all the documentation of the fact that you hired someone to do it and put it in your folder, correct? Okay. We're still talking about water. Now I will tell you that they haven't done near the research on water that they did on wind. I think we're going to start seeing more and more and more come out about keeping water out of the house too. A lot of gable ends have vents in them. You can buy and replace your vent with a vent that closes up. You can manually close it and then open it back up when the wind's not blowing. Now you have to open it back up because almost in every case, our attics are designed to have airflow. Okay, that's why we have the vents. If you have turbines, you need to get rid of them. They will not survive. They will not survive the storm. If your house has one of those things over there on the left, we don't see as many of them as we used to, but figure out a way to vent your attic without it. Soffits. Remember we mentioned the word soffit. Francis. Hurricane Francis, which came in over here on the East Coast, came over and went across on top of my house as a tropical storm. And when the wind quit blowing, we went outside and looked around, and my front yard was littered with this. Aluminum soffit. How many of y'all have that kind of soffit with all the holes in it? I mean, it's everywhere in Florida. Here's the deal. I said to my husband, I said, what happened? He said, well, there's a channel up against the building, up against the house, and then there's a channel out on the eave. And all they do is take those panels and slide them in there. That's it. They're not adhered at all. In fact, you can go along and you can just bounce them out if you want to, in many cases. I was lucky. I just lost my panels, and frankly, we replaced it. And that's one of the things I got the increase for, is I no longer had that as a soffit. But in Charlie's pass down in Charlotte County, they weren't so lucky. Hundreds of houses, their soffit came out, and there was like a vacuum effect that sucked water up into the attics of these houses. And sadly, many of the homeowners didn't know what happened until about 3 weeks later, when their houses were inundated with mold and mildew, and they actually had to gut the house. Now, what I recommend to you is, if you have that soffit, seriously consider replacing it with a more solid soffit. that doesn't have nearly so much exposure, and also try to make sure you get up in there and get a little more bracing up in there, because there's not much of anything to adhere anything to. One choice in older houses, a lot of times, if you look at this on the left here, you can see it's a fairly solid soffit, and it sort of has a piece running through it, and there's screen on that. And then over on the right side, you can have a soffit that's solid that has vents in it. Now this particular vent is a little bit interesting because this particular vent actually is designed that it closes up when the pressure gets to a bad pressure, a hurricane type pressure, and it opens back up again when it's not. And it closes on the side of the house you need it closed on, and opens up on the side you don't. So,
What would you call that, pressure relief vents?
yes. Yeah. But it also, of course, provides airflow.
No, I know, but it's basically a pressure relief.
Yes.
Isn't it important for your roof shingle to breathe? In other words, if your soffit's not open and you don't have, and your ridge isn't open, your roof doesn't breathe, so your shingles deteriorate.
I didn't say close it up.
Well, I know, but
I said change, oh, excuse me, I didn't finish that.
you're advocating, taking a lot of that breathable,
You don't need that much.
you don't need that much.
You don't need that much. Okay?
That's not according to northern contractors. Northern contractors is much different, so you gotta have almost equal square footage on your soffit as you do on your ridge.
I have no idea. All I can tell you is it'll work just fine if you don't have quite so much exposure. If you have this kind of soffit, the center one, and you don't want to do anything else, then at least go in there and try and put some screws in it. There's not much to screw to. And caulk it. And maybe that'll give you a 50-50 chance that it'll stay in if another storm.
Are you talking about that
Okay.
piece in the middle, that white thing?
Yes. I should have one of those samples like you have. I should have a sample to show people. Does it make sense?
I didn't know what it was. I never saw anything like that.
Oh,
Looks like a
look around.
vent you pull down.
No, 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 no. This? No, no, this right here?
No, I meant the one above.
Oh, the above. That's a ridge vent. You've seen ridge vents.
Never saw nothing like that. I've only been down here 2 years, so.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what. When you leave here today, I want you to look up. Okay? And I promise you, you won't go very far that you won't see some ridge vents.
Really?
Those are ridge vents. Yeah. Yeah. And they may not be white. They may be the same, and in most cases, they're the same color. They try to match it to whatever the shingle but no, those are ridge vents. And you can buy ridge vents that close up too. I've also heard of people getting up there and putting those doodles, or what do they call them? You know, the pool noodles. You know what I'm talking about? The styrofoam things or foam things. But then you know, I don't know about you, but I'm not getting on the roof, and I don't want my husband on the roof. So that's just really not a great option. What we actually did is we replaced our vinyl or our aluminum soffit with a hardy board product that is concrete, solid, and just has some holes in it, not near as many holes. And we're doing fine. We're doing absolutely fine as far as letting the air out. For those of you who saw Hurricane Andrew, we saw a lot of this, didn't we? Gables failed all over the place. The gable ends fell down, and frankly, in many cases in Andrew, the gable ends fell down and then the trusses just collapsed because they weren't braced at all. This sample is in your booklet of how to do it, but I strongly recommend that you, if you have a gable end, that you go up and make sure it's braced, and if it isn't, that you arrange to have it braced. The picture over here on the left was shared with us by Rebuild Northwest Florida. They've done a huge amount of mitigation, hardening houses up in the Escambia, Pensacola area. And we said, well, how come, what's that white? And she said, when we brace the gables and we brace the trusses, we paint the 2x4s white. And we said, why? And she said, so the inspector can see it and we can take a picture of it and put it in our brochure or put it in our file to prove we did it. Makes a lot of sense. So along with anything else you might do whatever you can to make it very visible, or you can absolutely prove that you did it and how you did it. Now, unfortunately, and don't ask me why, the insurance company no longer gives you a discount for having your gables braced. Now, remember what I said. My objective in being here today is not to teach you how to save money. It is to teach you how to save your house. So if you have gables, figure out and get your gables braced. It may save your house. Oops, wait a minute.
Does that apply to hip roofs too?
No, no, you don't have gables and hips roofs.
No, I know, but I mean.
Yeah.
Should you brace your hip roofs
No, you're
too?
okay. It's not gonna, the
Because-
pressure's not the same.
Because if the roof comes off, all this other business is nonsense.
That's right. That's right. If the roof comes off, you're toast. Now, the good news is, if you don't have, now, last year, we were redoing the insurance on this house we have in Venice. It was my mother's house. And the insurance agent said, did I say this already? Sometimes I forget whether I say things already. Anyhow, the insurance agent said to me, he said, have you had the house inspected? I said, well, isn't that funny? Look at what I do for a living, and no, I haven't. So he said, if we get the house inspected, it'll cost you about $75. And I think if he got hurricane clips, and the roof was done in 1998, he knew that. He said, back then they typically put hurricane clips on houses that didn't have them. He said, so I think it might have it. And if it does, I think I can save you about $300 on your insurance. So it made sense to me, $75, $300 savings. In fact, that's not just $300 one year, that's $300 for 5 years. So that certainly made sense. Had the inspection done, sure enough, had hurricane clips. $340 savings on my wind policy right off the bat, did not do a thing. Did not do a thing. Now, if your house doesn't have hurricane clips, if you take the soffit off, you can get to this space. And you can have hurricane clips installed. Okay? You don't have to take the roof off. But if you're going to take the roof off, if you're redoing your roof, then you also ideally want to take the outer layer of the sheeting off. In many cases you need to do that anyway, because sometimes water will intrude into that outer edge, you know, where the eave drip is, and you probably need to replace that plywood. Whether you do or you don't, if the plywood's good, you can put it back on. If you do that, then what you want to do is strap your trusses. In other words, metal straps. You take a strap, you adhere it to the plate, and you send it over the truss. In fact, today there's even double strapping of trusses. Whatever you can do to hold this down is what you want to do. It is your insurance to save your house. Does that make sense? Anybody got any questions about that?
That's a clip.
This is a clip. These are hurricane clips. Both of these are considered hurricane clips. They're designed to hold the trusses to the plate. We're going to talk about the next slide. And then, of course, the plate now is tied to, in the Hurricane Andrew design or construction, they didn't have this. They didn't have this. They had whole trusses, whole roofs that just came off. They were just set up there. Maybe a couple of nails put in, but no solid holding them up there. And as it went on down, there was nothing holding it to the foundation either.
Okay, so my house was built in 1981. It does not have clip.
Probably doesn't. It may. And here's the good news. Every so often you get a good builder. And the builder knows to put those on. A Florida builder. My husband always put hurricane clips on houses. He's never built a house that didn't have it, and he started building in the 70s. So yes.
You're basically showing us a frame house there.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with block.
But if you have concrete and you have a tie-beam, aren't they strapped into the concrete with hurricane straps that are where the hurricane straps are basically poured with the tie beam?
As long as they did it. It wasn't code back prior to 2002.
You'll see some houses that they put the strap too far in the tie beam, and the strap doesn't wrap the truss totally. And if it doesn't wrap the truss totally, it's considered a clip. And if it doesn't have 3 nails or more, it's considered a toenail. So even though you have a tie beam with the presumption that it's going to be strapped, it may be clipped by the definition in the mitigation.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely right. Obviously, it would be probably tougher for me to bring in a concrete version of this. If you go out to Carla's house, you'll see it. But definitely, they're doing the same sort of thing to concrete construction. And you're right. The good builders years ago, the good builders would definitely sink straps into the concrete. And some of them brought them all the way around and re-adhered them. Some of them didn't. Some of them just tacked them up here. Nobody, including my husband, he said, you know, a number of years ago, he said to me, I had no idea. I had no idea I had to worry about this uplift thing. They just didn't think about it. They thought they were just holding it on. Shingles did not come off the roofs in Hurricane Andrew or in the hurricanes. They don't come off the roofs because they get blown off by the wind. They get sucked off. And here we go. This is what we're talking about, continuous load. Okay? Roof to wall, and then you have the plate coming across, so you got the roof tied to the plate. This is the plate, horizontal. And then you got the plate tied to the studs, or you've got a lintel coming across or whatever and tying it down. In concrete construction, they're going to send, what do they call them? Rebar down. They're going to pour the cells. As you go down, our house was a wood frame house. We were able to take the siding off the house, and we were able to strengthen it all the way down. My husband had put bolts in the concrete that the bottom plate was tied to. Where we found the fault was, and you find this many cases, is that many of your contractors would bolt the plate in. But then when they put the studs to the plate, they just stuck it with a little toenail. You know, just one little, just to make sure it stayed up there until they got it up. So what we were able to do, of course, is come back and put the metal and tie the studs to the plate that was bolted to the floor. Remember what I said about the fortified home that had had a little bit of damage? You want to make sure also that you're paying attention to any of your porches, any of your overhangs, any of your porches. Make sure they're tied down well. You also want to make sure that your neighbors' porches and overhangs are tied down well. The reason that window is broken is because the little front porch from across the street came over and went through that window. Again, feel free to take an extra book with you for your neighbor. Windows. Windows. Years ago, the way they used to put windows in. We've seen it. You know, you got concrete block construction, you got wood frame construction, you're going along and you look and here's a hole. And you say, oh, look, they're going to put that kind of window there, and they're going to put this door here, and whatever. And that's what they do. They had the opening. They'd set the window in there. If you were lucky, they came along, they stuffed some insulation around it, and then they just brought the stucco and the molding right up to it. In most cases, you are really lucky if they maybe sent a nail into the side to hold them in so they wouldn't fall out until they got that molding up there. But they are not solidly, in most cases, they are not solidly installed in your house. Strongly recommend, if you have older houses and older windows, that you consider replacing the windows and your doors. We're going to talk about doors in a minute. Today, what you buy is a wind-rated window and door. Okay? At least a wind-rated window or door. They're stronger. They're built to, you know, based on this new research, They're built to better withstand the wind. They're also, if they're installed today, they are installed quite differently. They go to a lot of effort, and they use a screw called a Tapcon. It's blue. And they screw them in all the way around. Window protection. Remember I said that if you're in the windborne debris area, which you all are, and there's a reason why they've designated you in the windborne debris area, they consider that you're at serious risk. The whole county, not just parts of it. Like I live in a county where it's just, you know, the coast. Your county is totally at risk. Well, here are some options you have. Plywood. Plywood's the cheapest, no question about it. But remember how I said that the windows and the doors were installed. If you use plywood, you want to make sure that your plywood comes 6 inches outside of the opening. Do not cut a piece of plywood to cover the window, because what will happen is the whole thing, remember how the door frame flew out? The whole thing will just fly out. Steel panels. You've seen steel panels. Oops, what did I do? Steel panels. I was visiting a friend of mine down in Miami-Dade County a few years ago. She built a new house. And I'm walking in through her garage, and I looked over, and here's this big, tall stack of metal panels. And I said, what are those? She said, oh, that's my opening protection. You know, Miami-Dade County, you got to have that stuff. This was a few years ago. And I said, oh, okay. I'm walking in her house, and she's got a 2-story living room. Big windows up on the 2nd story, right? I'm thinking about those panels, and I'm thinking, Judith is a little older than I am, a little chubbier than I am, a lot less mobile than I am. Her husband's a little shorter than I am, a little chubbier, certainly not Mr. Mobile. So I said to her, I said, how are you going to get those metal panels up there? And she said, oh, it's not a problem, Jody. The guy down the street says he'll install them for us for $200. I said, okay. I said, when are you going to put them up? Next week? She said, Jody, it's just the end of May. We don't even have a hurricane threatening. I said, well, Judith, that guy that told you he put them up for $200 probably told everybody else in this 600-unit development that he put theirs up for $200 too. And it's my understanding, and it is true, it takes probably at least a half a day to install these metal panels on a typical house. Now, Carla had some really good advice today to everybody. If you're using metal panels, we strongly recommend you do a dry run. Maybe a dry run every spring to remember how you put them up and to make sure you have all the pieces that are ready to go and to give you a pretty good idea how long it's going to take for you to get them to be installed. But remember that when you're putting them up to typical hurricane season, the temperature is probably going to be about 30 degrees higher, certainly the stress level, and you know, if you wait long enough, the wind's not going to be much fun either. That's why I like impact-resistant glass. Now, it's expensive, no question about it. Most expensive probably of them all. The glass will break, it can break, but the membrane inside will not. Okay, this happens to be an insulated, a slice of an insulated impact-resistant glass window. The added benefit you get with that is the fact that you get some energy efficiency to go with it. Let me see, what have I got here? I'm going to pass some of these around. But you can see the impact-resistant glass is a glass that has 2 pieces of glass, and then it has sort of a membrane inside. Hopefully they'll get it to you. A membrane inside of it. If you'll pass it around.
Okay.
The membrane does not break. Okay? I'll show you this one. There you go. The membrane does not break. So it's really something to consider, and as I say, it is expensive, there's no question about it, but if you have the impact glass, you don't have to, that is you're replacing your window. So new windows and opening protection, you get both for the same amount. Accordion shutters, you all have seen those. You know, they can close up like this, or you can have the ones that come down. Those are a great option too. Unfortunately, there still has to be somebody there to close them. Now, I got concerned after being with Judith and being at her house and worrying about. I said, okay, if we take the opening protection, but we visiting our neighbor or our relatives up in Minnesota, when the storm threatens, and we're not there to install our plywood or our metal panels, what's going to happen? And so I started asking biggies at the insurance companies. They wouldn't answer me. They just sort of didn't answer. Finally, I'm talking after 2 or 3 years, I finally got an answer out of them. They said, we'll reimburse you for the premium, but we will not honor the claim. So be careful. Now, recently I got a letter from Citizens, because the house in Venice is insured by Citizens, and they said they would honor the claim, but they would significantly discount it. That's what the letter said, significantly discount it. So be careful. Fabric shutters. This is a product that's out there. Oh, and you want to make sure no matter what, I'm not sure that they produce plywood that's Miami-Dade approved, but all the rest of this, you want to make sure that it is, if you're buying it and investing your money in it, you want to make sure it's Miami-Dade approved or building code equivalent. Okay, start remembering that. Don't buy any of these products to harden your house, fortify your house, unless it's got that sticker on it. And the stickers. We got it.
What does it say? Does it just say Miami-Dade, or does it got some?
It'll say Miami-Dade. Here's one. Let me see here.
Next to the panels, too, if you get the metal panels, that's extra now.
If you come up here later, it just says Miami-Dade. It's a sticker here, and it says Miami-Dade approved.
The stickers fade after a while, and then they have trouble reading it, and they refuse to acknowledge that, but that's what it said.
And guess what? That's why you take the picture
Manila envelope.
and put it, yes, and put it in your manila envelope. As soon as you have anything that you buy, have it installed and take a picture of it, so you can prove it's that and it's, you know, on the house, and take that picture and put it into the manila folder. Okay? And also, we've got to re-educate. We have to re-educate the building industry, because we've got to start teaching the installers and the painters not to remove these stickers and not to paint over them. Now, worst case, you want to take the sticker off, take a picture of it on the door, on the window, take it off and put it in your folder. That's probably better than having somebody else take it off or it getting painted over.
After closing and we took possession of the house back in June, we finally figured out what all those aluminum slats were in the garage. And we figured out the numbering scheme of how
to put them up?
How to put them up, but they didn't leave us any screws at all.
Oh, bless their hearts.
So now we got them though.
Yeah, well, then you have one of these dry runs in your future, because you'll have to figure out what you need and hopefully figure out how to put it up. This fabric, evidently it's very successful to use on large openings like lanais and things like that. Its objective here, of course, is to keep projectiles from your windows, from your openings. You know, it is an option. A year ago, I didn't know much of anything about it. Now I know just a little bit about it. But people are using it, and hopefully it's going to work. Yeah, you can bolt it, and in her case, if you go out, this is Carla from the Hurricane House up in University of Florida. And you can go up there, and she's got a sample of it, and you can see it's strapped in. So you definitely could walk out, unstrap it. Yeah, you probably can. Oh, wow, cool. Masking tape. Unless you have nothing better to do. For 2 hours, to 10 hours, to 20 hours after the wind stops blowing, do not put masking tape on your windows. It does absolutely no good whatsoever. And it will take you 2 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, if ever, to get it back off. Okay?
What about duct tape on the seams?
Same thing. Don't bother. Unless you have nothing better to do.
Oh, I got a lot of better things to do.
Pardon? Oh yeah, window film. No, it doesn't work. Remember Miami-Dade approved or equivalent? I'm not kidding. Anybody come this fall? I was getting ready to do some of these workshops, and I had this wonderful gentleman. He's a UCC minister, and he actually has been like in the hierarchy of the state UCC. And he came up to me and he said, "Oh, we found this really great product." And it was like a styrofoam type thing that had Velcro on it. And he said, "We're going to have this done at the Ecumenical Center." Well, now the Ecumenical Center is a big building in Orlando where many, many of our faith traditions have their headquarters. And he said, "You know, oh, it's really reasonable, really cheap." And I said to him, I said, "Huh?" Now what they were going to do, they were going to sell him this like styrofoam stuff that they would Velcro into the window. Now you can imagine after my presentation today how impressed I would be with that. And I said to him, I just said one thing. I said, "Miami-Dade approved?" Oh. I said, "I suggest before you invest the church's money in something like that, that you ask that question." That was the end of that discussion. So be careful. Do not spend money on any of this stuff unless they can prove to you that it is Miami-Dade approved or building code equivalent. Okay? French doors, if you're covering French doors with like plywood or something to protect them, don't put a piece on this side and a piece on this side. Do it this way at least. The weak point is in the middle. Okay? Does that make sense? And then that's just a sample. Those are some shutters that you can have. Now, the problem with shutters, somebody has to be there to close them. So you have to figure that out if you're not going to be around. I'm wondering, there has to be some way, you know, if I can call my house and have my shower running when I get home, there has to be a way that I can call and close my shutters. Don't you think? I don't know. Here's an easy one. If you haven't had your door replaced, buy a new wind-resistant door. Your door should open out, not in. Okay, your entry door should open out, not in. New doors are stronger. The hinges, they have more hinges. The hinges have more holes in them, so they hold tighter. You want a 1-inch deadbolt on any of your exterior doors. Okay, you want to hold that dude in there. You do not want it to open. And you want to make sure that it's properly installed. You have to watch, and please, building departments, be very diligent about inspecting that they actually put all the screws in.
They are.
They are today, huh? Are you a building inspector?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
We install them.
Oh, okay, well, good, good. Make sure that they put them in. I actually had a new front door put in my house as part of the whole thing, and the carpenter that was doing it, I went out there, he said, "Jody, you don't want me to put all these in?" I said, "Put them in. Put them in." Garage door. Here's another easy fix. Replace your garage door with a Miami-Dade approved wind-resistant garage door. It's not very expensive. We did the one in Venice for $1,300, and one of the reasons that I did it was the spring was not good. If you've got an old garage door, I can promise you a broken spring is probably in your future. It's very dangerous, and that's going to cost you about $450. So get a new garage door and replace the spring too. Easy. Yes?
Why isn't there a law or code that says garage door installers must install a wind-proof door? I was out of town, my spring broke. My wife called me, I told her to call the garage door guy. He came, he installed a new door, got 2 new posts. The old door had posts too, but we got 2 new posts. And there's not a sticker on the door that says it's windproof. And
I'd
the posts don't have
call
to be-
him up and raise Cain. I would. But you're right. It is not required. Why is it not required? It makes no sense. Makes no sense, does it?
I got these big bars that go across my door. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna replace all the bolts because they use sheet metal screws rather than nuts and bolts with flat washers, number one. And your track, if it's not fastened against your wall, that door is gonna blow the track right off. So I put in cement anchors and nuts and bolts on the track. Because my understanding is that if that door blew through, it would blow right through the garage, the ceiling door going up into the attic, and your roof would have been gone anyhow.
I would tell you in a hurricane, if your garage door fails, your roof's history.
Right.
You saw the video, didn't you?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, yeah. I am sure, and evidently this do you install garage doors too?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I am sure that there are standards of how they install these garage doors.
Yeah, and you can put L brackets on to reinforce your railings too. You can even use a piece of 4x4 and bolt it into the wall and brace it up there, kind of like a bookcase would be braced.
The mitigation-
And she had a, pardon?
But the mitigation, even if you have an older door and you do stuff to it, the mitigation won't accept that as a reinforcement.
No,
And
no.
mitigation is not cumulative either, the discounts. I mean, if you can add up 110% in mitigation, it's only up to whatever the maximum
80%.
that insurance company will
Yeah,
give you.
80%.
Yeah.
The most you're going to get is 80%. If you replace the garage door, they're typically heavier, so you may have to replace your operator, your thing as well. Make sure when they install it that it's balanced, because these doors are heavier, and especially if you're using it as your secondary means to exit, somebody in the house needs to be able to lift it in case the power is out. But the other thing that Carla suggested too is when the wind is blowing, in other words, when we're threatened by a storm, disconnect your operator. So in case there's a power surge or something crazy happens that in the middle of the storm the garage door does not decide to open, it's happened. So I leave this slide in there because my husband, every time we have a storm threat, my husband wants to back the car up against the garage door to protect it. Well, the issue is that if it's our turn for our garage door to fail, we're pretty guaranteed it'll get the car too. So don't bother. These are in your this information is in your booklet. There's all kinds of great information out there on the web of how to do this, like step by step, and certainly, all kinds of ways and answers to all kinds of questions you may have. Now I have a little video to show you. It sort of sums it all up here. If I can get it to play.
On August 13th, 2004, Hurricane Charlie, the first of 4 major storms in a historic hurricane season, hit the southwest coast of Florida. In its path were longtime Florida residents Chris and Jerry Webb in a home they had just built, and Jim Minardi and Teresa Fogolini in a home built in the 60s. Even though the two homes are right next to one another, their experiences could not have been more different.
The howling was incredible. Just picked up our roof, threw it into the sailboat, threw it into their pool cage, and threw a lot of the stuff into the canal. It was really scary at that point.
While Jim Minardi found it necessary to vacate his home at the storm's peak, Chris and Jerry Webb were relatively unfazed by staying put.
We felt very comfortable in our home, and I felt comfortable as far as having others come here out of the storm.
Why did one homeowner sustain only minor damage when his neighbor's house was severely impacted? In short, the difference in the building codes and practices when the two homes were constructed. Many of Florida's building practices were bolstered in recent years in the wake of the damage left by Hurricane Andrew.
There were lessons learned in Andrew that were brought here even before the building codes totally caught up with the changes that needed to be in place. And then since the codes have caught up with that, the newer construction has done quite well.
I certainly feel that I would not have felt comfortable in a lot of the homes that were built in the late 60s or early 70s with essentially no hurricane code at that time. The current hurricane codes, if you look around Punta Gorda, made a heck of a difference.
But for those without the protection of upgraded building codes and enhanced building practices, there is only frustration.
The added cost, I think, is insignificant compared to the disaster that takes place when you totally lose your home and contents and things that really aren't replaceable.
That's the message that organizations like IBHS, FEMA, and the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes have been preaching ever since Hurricane Andrew. It may cost a little more to build a home right, but it's worth it.
Some of the most satisfied and proud people in the state of Florida right now are the builders who build with quality in mind and have customers who were safe inside their homes and whose lives were not disrupted. Those are really some of the true heroes of this hurricane season.
And it's not only the homeowners who benefit when houses withstand the storm.
For every house that is built in a safer way in a hurricane-prone area, it's really a long-term savings for the federal government and the taxpayer, because those are less dollars that the federal government has to spend on temporary housing, on debris pickup, on other kinds of emergency services.
What is the key to storm-resistant construction? Keeping its connections in place, roof to wall, floor to floor, and floor to foundation. The roof is your first line of defense in a storm. Securely anchor roof to wall connections by installing hurricane clips. Secure floor to floor connections by making sure each floor is connected to the one below, also with straps or clips. Wall to foundation connections should be made through the use of anchor bolts. The other key to home survival is keeping windows in place so wind cannot penetrate your home and compromise it from within. Though these loss prevention measures are an investment in your home, it's one that Jim and Teresa wish now that they had made.
Spend that extra money because I think you're just asking for trouble. You're going to go through something, whether it's 5 years from now or 40 years from now, and you're going to end up in a situation where you have a house potentially like this, and now, you're without a home, have to rebuild or even repair.
Sort of tells the whole story, doesn't it? I guess, one of the things I want to remind all of you, not only is there a price of living in paradise where we all live, things that never happened before, things that never happened in 100 years, they talk about 100-year floods, 100-year storms, things that never happened in 500 years. Sandy was a 500-year event that hit up in the east, happen every day. It is only a matter of time before we get hit again. We will get hit again. We just don't know when. So hopefully you will all be hardened up and strengthened up, and you'll be like the gentleman in the video that closes up his house and invites everybody over and maybe serves them hot coffee, or if it's later in the day, something else, and you survive just fine. If you do, if any one of you in this room hardens your house and survives the storm, I've done my job. So thank you for being here.